Wild Review. I'm the Wild Reviewer, and today I'm going to review a thing. Have you ever given a review on something and years later you wonder if what you said still holds up? Well, I have. Hi there, I'm the Wild Reviewer, or at least I was told that's who I am, and this is Rewild, a sequel series to an old review show I used to do called The Wild Review. It ran for 6 seasons from 2015 to 2018, and some of the things that I've talked about, I have different opinions on. Or maybe I don't. That's the whole point of this series. If you are watching this, then that means you are joining me on an adventure as we are going to take a journey into my past to see if what I said in a previous Wild Review episode still holds up. We're gonna make comments about how young I used to look and stupid I used to sound sometimes. It kinda depends on what I was talking about. So, unless you have somewhere else important you need to be, which I highly doubt, seems like you're gonna be taking a journey with me into the past. This is the Wild Review Rewild.
Wild like wild.
I thought the name was cool. Hello, welcome to the Wild Review. I'm the Wild Reviewer, and welcome back to another episode of Rewild. It's time to talk about lab rats again, kids. If you've been with me for a while, you'll recall that I was the biggest Lab Rats geek when it was on. Lab Rats, of course, being a show on Disney XD, it focused on 3 siblings who had bionic abilities. That's pretty much it. There are a lot of episodes of the Wild Review where I am just talking about lab rats. I think I talk about it a little too much. Last season of Rewild, I did take a look at my original Lab Rats video, which you can see at the bottom of the description. Not at the bottom, but it'll be in the description if you'd like to check that out. Today we're going to look back at what I had to say about Lab Rats Elite Force, which was the spin-off and sequel to both Lab Rats and Mighty Med, which was a completely different Disney XD show that had actually crossed over with Lab Rats. I never did a full-on video about Mighty Med. It was just not a show that I was absolutely obsessed with like I was with Lab Rats. And part of that has to do with the comedy and the way the characters were written. It wasn't so much action-packed compared to how funny it was. I didn't even laugh at many of the jokes. That's not to say that the idea was not fun and interesting. Also, the comedy bits weren't entertaining. There were some jokes that did make me laugh. Is that a fly? Something just flew by my face. In Season 4 of Lab Rats and Season 2 of Mighty Med, the two shows collided for a epic 1-hour adventure episode. Anyway, that's what Lab Rats and Mighty Med did, and I'm just gonna assume behind the scenes that the creators of Lab Rats looked at this crossover, saw how extremely well it did with ratings. I guess it must have done really well because somebody behind the scenes of this show had to go, whoa, this is pretty cool. Hey, maybe we should do more of these character dynamics. Let's actually have the bionic people with the superheroes. That could be pretty interesting. And then eventually it became its own television series with only half of the cast of Lab Rats and half the cast of Mighty Med returning. So we have Lab Rats Elite Force, a 1-season show that only aired in the year 2016, and if we have to assume that it would last a full 4 seasons like Lab Rats did, the show would have been over by now, which is really fascinating to think about, and often I wonder what actually would the show have been like if it continued. All we can do is theorize of what happened to poor Douglas. He got his eyes zapped. It's very possible that he could have gone blind. Although, with it being a Disney show, I don't think they're going to take it that route. They're probably, if anything, I feel like they were going to give him bionics, like bionic eyes. That would have been interesting. I'm theorizing. Anyway, let's take a look back at this Wild Review episode from Season 3, and let's see what I had to say. This is Lab Rats Elite Force Rewild. If you've been with me long enough, you'll know that one of my favorite shows is Lab Rats. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, that stupid little Disney Channel show with the really bad effects, the bad comedy. Well, shut up! Maybe the comedy's a little rough, but when you get past all the stuff that you consider bad, it can actually be a pretty awesome show. I guess I should have mentioned this at the very beginning. I actually reconnected with Lab Rats earlier this year. There's a video by some kid. I don't know the name of him on the top of my head. Hey, why don't we actually look it up since I have a computer right in front of me? Kayon Carlili. I have butchered your name, young man, but this guy, earlier this year, put out a 3-hour video overlooking the entire Lab Rat series. And then, just a few months ago, he did the exact same thing with Mighty Med. And if I'm not wrong, I believe he said he was going to work on an Elite Force retrospect video overlooking that entire series. Now, because for some reason every Disney Channel show that makes it up to their 4th season has to make that their last season for some reason. No other Disney Channel show has gone past 5 seasons. The creators of Lab Rats obviously, I guess, weren't done telling the story, and seeing that their crossover with Mighty Med did very well, that gave them the idea to merge the two popular shows together and create somewhat what people can consider the 5th season of Lab Rats, but not confirmed 5th season. Better yet, a spin-off of Lab Rats Elite Force. Disney shows have ended after their 4th season. Did you know there used to be a thing on Disney called the 65th Rule? Aha, yeah, I got it right. What does that mean? Well, back in the day on the Disney Channel, a lot of their original programming would only have 65 episodes. I don't know what shows on the Disney Channel have been affected by this 65th rule. I could possibly look it up, but I think it's best maybe if I just put the list of shows over here. I'll do it later when I'm editing, because it'll save me a lot of time so I can continue this filming. Because if it was for live action shows, then it would make sense, because everybody grows up. So, I mean, this is a common issue that a lot of teen shows have where you're in high school. Well, eventually you become 20 years old. You know, you're playing a freshman in high school. You can't really do that if you're 20 or 21 years old. I mean, if you got the baby face, maybe, but it can be a little awkward. So maybe with the live action shows, it would work. There would be a cutoff, so this way they know, okay, we can't do any more with these kid actors because they're starting to look too old. But it was also an effect for animated shows, which I don't understand now thinking about it, because animation, you could do whatever. I mean, Timmy Turner was 10 years old for a very long time. I think too long in my opinion, but you can have them in a floating timeline in animation. You really can't do that with live action, so it would make more sense to do it in live action shows than animation, but I think it was for animation also. Anyway, where I'm going with this is they've since scrapped the 65th rule, and instead of stopping a show after its 65th season, they I guess did a similar thing where they would stop a show from running once it hit its 4th season. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this about Disney shows, but a lot of them only run with 4 seasons. And specifically with the 4th season, there's always a theme. I may have mentioned this before, but there are a lot of Disney shows, at least the ones that I was growing up with when I was a kid in the early 2000s. A lot of them, when they hit their 4th season, they have a different title, and they have an overall theme. Like Lab Rats, for instance, is Lab Rats
Bionic Island
as of season 4. Livin' Maddie was Livin' Maddie Cali edition. Is that right? Hannah Montana was Hannah Montana Forever. I'm even going to argue that The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody was getting that treatment if they had been renewed for a 4th season, but they only had 3 seasons. The show continued in their spin-off where they were on a boat, so something tells me that their 4th season was supposed to actually take place on a boat, but they felt they could do so much more with it, so they decided to make it its own show, so this way they can continue the story. That's my theory. A bunch of other shows didn't do that, like Wizards of Waverly Place didn't go through that, or Good Luck Charlie, Kicking It. Even Phineas and Ferb has 4 seasons. You would think it has at least 6 with all the episodes it has, but they only have 4. They're cramming a bunch of episodes within 1 season, I believe. Jessie, although Jessie had a spin-off called Bunked, but that happened after the 4th season. But the shows would always end at the 4th season, and the 4th season would always have some sort of theme, and they would get a whole new set, maybe even some new characters, possibly. That's what they did with Lab Rats here. All of the episodes of Season 4 of Lab Rats take place on the Bionic Island. This has changed, I guess. It changed once again. I have not watched Disney Channel in a very long time. I still watch Disney XD, but mostly for the cartoons that they play. But from what I understand, Bunked and Raven's Home are so far the only shows on Disney Channel that I am aware of that have actually made it to a 5th season. I actually want to say that Bunked may even be going into its 6th season. Very interesting. That has never happened. I've never heard of that before. So that's cool. That was a long discussion just to talk about how long Disney shows last. I've expressed my love for Lab Rats multiple times, but I never really talked about Mighty Men. I would throw it here and there in a conversation, and it was an alright show, but it annoyed me to a point. Mighty Med isn't anything like Lab Rats, and in fact, it's actually the opposite of Lab Rats, where Lab Rats focuses on bionic heroes and Mighty Med focuses on superheroes. It focuses on these two kids, Kaz and Oliver, discovering a hidden superhero hospital where if superheroes get hurt, they're instantly put into this hospital where they'll get better. It's a hospital for injured superheroes. That's pretty clever. The idea and characters were all very clever, but the thing that bothered me about the show was the comedy. As I have stated probably a few times, including just a few moments ago, the biggest problem I had with Mighty Med was its comedy aspect. Because it was a children's sitcom, it had to be funny, and that's fine. I love comedy, I love good jokes, but they seem to have gone to the next level with their jokes. They're very cringy. One of the characters, I believe his name was Alan, he was the worst character in my opinion. Rethinking about the character Gus, he also wasn't a big favorite of mine. I mean, the way that jokes in Mighty Med work, they would essentially go, we gotta save this hero before time runs out. Oh, stop being dramatic. We have enough time. I know we have enough time, but I'm literally saying that time is running out. And then there would just be like a character named Time and he's waiting to run out. Like, the jokes would be extremely literal. Sometimes that's funny, but they did it way too many times. One of the main gags that I recall that I cringe at a lot is when Alan starts to go to the high school Kaz and Oliver go to, and he's like, well, I watched a bunch of high school movies. When do we start singing and dancing? Referring to High School Musical, obviously. And they're like, that doesn't actually happen. And sure enough, a musical number occurs in the background, and it's just really cringy to me. Some of the I didn't land with some of the jokes very well, but there were a few jokes that I did actually like. One of them that comes to mind is, I believe it was in the first episode of season 2. They're looking for a certain remote, and they use a remote, press a button, and so many more remotes show up. And they're like, oh, maybe it's this one, and then more remotes show up. So I find that pretty humorous. But the jokes were one of the main problems I had with the show. I wasn't a big fan when it came to the comedy. Also, they didn't know how to take themselves serious most of the time when serious issues happened. Like Lab Rats, even though they would be resolved in very childish ways, but still, it was kind of a problem. I didn't enjoy it. It bothered me. So that was really my one concern about Lab Rats and Mighty Med colliding to make one big show. I thought because Lab Rats was more of a serious tone, also funny show, merging with a 100% comedy show, I thought that would tone down the seriousness. But surprisingly, it didn't. The main plot of Lab Rats Elite Force mostly picks up from when we last saw Donald, Chase, and Bree from the Lab Rats series finale. Mighty Med has been destroyed by 2 unknown superheroes, and somewhere between Space Colony and The Vanishing, Kaz and Oliver contact Donald to see if they could use any of his technology to track down these superheroes that did this to Mighty Med and killed most of their friends. And then Donald had an idea, that he would definitely help Kaz and Oliver find the people that did these to his friends, but instead of giving them the technology where they could track these people down, Donald had an idea to combine bionic heroes with superheroes and make one big elite force, so this way they can get revenge on the death of all these people. And the plot is actually pretty intense when you hear it better. Not from me, but maybe from Donald saying it. There's one thing I like about this plot. It's that Mighty Med was destroyed. And no, it's not because I didn't like Mighty Med. Mighty Med is an okay show. But I like the fact that Mighty Med was destroyed because it toned down the comedy and goofiness of Kaz and Oliver. Especially Kaz, even. Mighty Med being destroyed was a really good plot element. I think that gave a little more plot to this story. And even a little, like, amazement that they went that far. Yeah, I just got done talking about how Mighty Med was a bit too over the top with its humor, and you would think, seeing that we have already seen Mighty Med various times, and we know the people that work there, and we know the vibe that goes on there, to see it just kind of destroyed, and the idea that some of these characters that actually were in the show could potentially be dead, that's freaking awesome! You never see that in kids' shows. That's amazing! I definitely think that this, without a doubt, was a good setup for the show. And also changed the tone when it came to Mighty Med. Especially Kaz, Oliver, and Skylar. I mean, they were written more as lab rat characters. So their Mighty Med antics were toned down a lot. But I really think that this was a good story element to add into the story. It's actually an even better way to get them involved with the story, other than going, oh, well, there's some bad guys out, I'm forming a new team, and I think they're very powerful since the last time you guys met them, so yeah, let's team up together, let's team you guys up. No, it's much better if something devastating happens to where they ask for help, and Davenport's like, oh, I got an idea, why don't I just put a team together with you guys, and they'll help you look for them. I think that calls for an interesting show. So far in the show, we've seen multiple Lab Rats characters return, like obviously Donald and Douglas returned, and even Principal Perry, and we're said that Tasha's going to return, and I don't know, maybe Adam and Leo will make an appearance in the show, hopefully. The new Davenport baby is supposed to make an appearance along with Tasha. We've also been introduced into some new characters, including the two new bad guys, Roman and Riker, who actually destroyed Mighty Med. All because Kaz and Oliver saved their father's life, but had to take his powers away or else he'll die. They're basically just doing it for revenge. Roman and Riker were pretty cool villains. You know, this show was very similar to Lab Rats in the sense of you had core story episodes that actually focused on the main story that was being told, and then you had its typical episodic shenanigan of the week, like, oh, Kaz can shapeshift into a sheep. Roman and Riker essentially were the antagonists for the season, if I could phrase them like that. I want to say their dad was really one of the main antagonists, but they appeared more than his dad, and they were all really good together as antagonists. More of the dad, really. I definitely saw a story working with Roman and Riker where I think Roman was the one who took things a little more serious, and Riker was like, no, I don't want to go through this, I'm afraid, or like that's the road that it was going down, because their relationship was a little strained. They knew they had to do something, but one of them was more angry and antagonistic than the other one. Is antagonistic a word? I feel like it's not. He was more of an antagonist than the other one. And had the series continued on, I definitely think they would have played with that, and eventually Riker would have been a good guy, much like how Douglas was a bad person but then became a good person in the end. In the third episode, really all we got was footage of the pig that was in the episode, because they were promoting a whole animal thing. I like the fact that they introduced like somewhat of a secondary villain. I kind of hope we see more of her and her pig, because I think they were pretty funny. They worked pretty well, and I don't know, I think it'd be cool. Well, the season finished in 2016, and it's currently 2022, so we might be waiting a while. And then episode 7, The List, was probably one of the greatest episodes in the show so far, as we got the greatest cliffhanger ever, where we saw Roman and Riker's dad, and when the episode premiered, I saw his costume, and I didn't look at the face because I didn't want to see his face, but the episode was pretty cool. It had Roman and Riker in it, and I'm such a geek. Just keep talking, little buddy. Alright, so they introduced a character called Crossbow. Alright, I don't care about that. They can introduce any new characters they want. I don't mind that, but Riker killed Crossbow. She died. And they brought her back to life, Kaz and Oliver. You can't do that! They do a lot of fake outs in this show, specifically when it comes to the deaths in this season, the show itself. I mean, they did the same thing in Lab Rats. You think Adam is on the verge of meeting his ultimate fate at the end of Space Colony, but no, he's alive. I mean, what do you expect? It's Disney. You can't kill somebody off like that in a TV show. You at least have to be in a movie and a parent. They are not parents yet. They don't have the right to die yet. Also, there are a lot of fake outs when it came to the trailers of this show. The episode Intruder, I remember there was a discussion with Chase and Douglas, and they're like, oh, it was your job to lock the door. You gotta make sure this whole place is secure, and the door was open. And Chase is like, no, I didn't do it. I made sure it was locked, and something comes through the door, so they prepare for whatever's coming through. I mean, you think it's gonna be a villain. Spoiler, it's just some kid. They hyped up the show with the trailers. I definitely remember that. I didn't like the payoff. I think it was a bit underwhelming. You think there's going to be a massive story here, but there really isn't. I mean, you only knew there was a massive story if Roman and Riker or their dad was in it. There's really only 3 key story elements in this series. I guess technically more, because Bree gets superpowers, which comes in handy. That's in the episode The Rock. And then I want to say the episode where they go back to Skylar's home planet, I want to say that's also an important episode, but doesn't really stand out. I don't even remember what happens. Well, I guess now's the part of the episode where I talk about the status of Lab Rats Elite Force. Have I made it clear that it's no longer on TV? I guess everybody just got sick of the bionic people, so after season 1, they just completely scrapped the show. And that's kind of a shame. It seemed like it was going into a really interesting direction, as Chase declares that they're going to be going to war with the shape-shifting people, right? Is that who they were? Well, you know what I mean. Yeah, so, I mean, that's pretty much it. Do I wish it was still on TV? Well, I'm not a young teenager anymore. If anything, it's just a TV show that was on Disney Channel. I'm not a big fan when it comes to rebooting an idea. I think you should embrace original ideas, which Hollywood obviously is not doing, but if there's one show that I would be very interested to see come back in some sort of way, it would be Lab Rats, because it does seem like that they have a lot of story potential, not just in Elite Force, but also what they left in the original Lab Rats show. They have a whole group of individuals that have bionic abilities now, so I think that would be really interesting to see maybe a new team, or maybe like a darker version of Lab Rats somewhere down the line. I think that'd be really interesting to see. But it doesn't look like we're getting that, especially since it has been 10 years since the original Lab Rats, and in the next 4 years it'll be 10 years since Elite Force, and it doesn't look like anything's going on with that franchise, so we're just going to have to leave it alone and go to bed and deal with it. Well, I said everything that I had to say when it came to Lab Rats Elite Force. I still think it was an average show. I don't think it was absolutely amazing looking back at it, but it was definitely good. In terms of Lab Rats itself, there was a lot more story development and entertaining bits for me to like. In this show, it was just a 1-season thing, and it seemed like it was going somewhere, but I think if we got a little bit more, I definitely would have enjoyed it a lot more than I probably would describe now, which is mediocre. It was good enough. It was fine. With that said, that brings us to the end of this episode of Rewild. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, give me a like, do whatever you like, or you don't have to. I don't care. I'm doing it regardless of your approval. If you'd like to see this original Wild review episode of Elite Force, you can click the link in the description, as well as checking out my previous Lab Rats Rewild episode, as well as the previous episodes of Rewild. I feel like I'm selling you stuff. Here, you can have all this stuff. Have all these videos. Have my content. That's it for this episode of Rewild. I'll see you next week when I do the exact same thing that I'm doing now. Thanks for watching The Wild Review, The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing. Wild like wild. I used to read the comments about Lab Rats Elite Force saying how some of them theorized that Victor Crane was going to make an appearance in the show. Victor Crane is dead, folks.